Welcome back to the Scouting the League podcast. If you follow what we do at Inside the League, you know who Alonzo Highsmith is. Today, we welcome the Senior Personnel Executive of the Patriots, a two-time Bart List Award winner, the 2021 winner of the C.O. Brocato Award, and one of the best peer evaluators in the game of football. Alonzo, welcome, buddy.
Thank you very much. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. It's great to have you. Normally, we dig into our guest's origin story, but we're going to do that kind of throughout the course of this. My first question, man, is last year, about this time, your son AJ was named the pro director for the Patriots. It's one of the rare father and son duos with one NFL team. What's it been like working with your son, man?
Well, it's been really special for me because me and my son have always had a great relationship, and you know, I think he's always wanted to work in football. We through our travels from Pop Warner through high school through college, and I'm sure he wanted to play pro football, but if he didn't play pro football, like most young men, you have to make a career decision, and I think he was always interested in football, and it's something he wanted to do. So, when he told me that's what he wanted to do, I pointed him in the right direction. And it's interesting because I never wanted to really work with my son. I wanted him to have his own career.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted him to make a name for himself. And people used to always ask me all the time about AJ, and I'd always say, he's doing fine about where he is, and we've always communicated. It was always great seeing him at pro days or at the combine. We'd go to dinner, and I'm very proud of him for the person he's become. And I've never made my life about football. I never wanted him to make his life about football. I've always wanted to make his life about being a good human being and a good teammate and a good person.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the most important qualities to me for him going forward in his life.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think everything happens for a reason in life. And I think the hardest thing that I've ever gone through in my life, and as well as him, is the passing of my wife, his mother. And, she was a driving force in our family. And, she's been with me since college. She's been with me my whole football career. And when my wife passed away, it was tough, but having AJ with me made it a lot more comfortable, easier to get through. And lo and behold, when he came to New England, I said, well, why don't you just live with me? And having him with me, going to work with him some days, we take separate cars. We don't want to ride together to work every day. So, having him with me and being a comfort zone for me mentally has been fantastic and something that was needed at that time.
Mm-hmm.
With my wife not here anymore, we've had to become take less for granted, because my wife was a person who did everything for everybody. And we've leaned on each other more than ever in life. And we've enjoyed working together. And at the time he did come to work with us in New England, Elliot asked me about it. He wanted to interview him. I probably would have said no a few years ago, but I think he's earned his stripes. I think he's done a hell of a job where he's been. And I thought it was the right time. I said, yep, I'm good with it now, because he's made his own way. I wanted him to succeed on his own. And if by chance we ever work together, he's not working there because I'm his father. He's working there because he earned his stripes, and nothing's given and much is expected. And I think he's passed all those tests for me.
AJ, it's not easy to find a job in scouting. It's even harder to find two jobs. And this is his third team that he's worked for. And I think that speaks for itself with regard to AJ's experience level, the way he's expected and all those kind of things. He also has both pro and college experience now, which I think says a lot for him. So, yeah, I agree with you, obviously, from an objective standpoint. Also wanted to say, because I'm not sure if I was able to, what a beautiful service it was for Denise. And you want to talk about the whole NFL coming out, again, just a testament to how people feel about you, how they feel about AJ, how they feel about the Highsmiths, man. So I can only imagine how difficult that was, but it was a really beautiful service and one I won't ever forget.
Oh, I appreciate it. And I used to always joke around and tell people if you didn't like me for some reason and you met my wife, you like me again. You say, okay, he must be all right because his wife is a special lady. And, so I really appreciate that. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Uh, Same is true for my wife. I mean, I'm not sure people like me, but I know they like Polly. All right, so we're going to get into more talking about your scouting career, Zoe, but you've got a fascinating story, and then a lot happened before you ever evaluated your first player. Let's go back to the 1984 Orange Bowl. This is the game that I would say kicked off the Miami dynasty. Started your season unranked, lost 28-3 to Florida in the opener, then went undefeated the rest of the way. 10.5 point underdog, people forget, against Nebraska in the Orange Bowl. What are your memories of the game? Did it surprise you when the Huskers went for two? And did it surprise you when Howard Schnellenberger left after that game to go to the USFL? A lot of interesting aspects of that game.
Yeah, it was interesting because coming out of high school as the number one recruited linebacker in the nation, I had never played running back in high school. I played running back in Pop Warner, but if you came in my room in high school, it was all pictures of Lawrence Taylor, Hugh Green,
Mm-hmm.
Mike Singletary. That was my ambition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I go to Miami as a freshman, and I was a good athlete. I was big. I was fast, and Howard Schellenberger said he wanted to try me at running back, and I cried, didn't want to do it, but my dad was a football coach my whole life, and I've always been a team player my whole life. And if he had told me you could win the Heisman Trophy if you play running back, I would have stayed on defense.
Mm-hmm.
But when he told me that if you play running back, we'll play for national championships and we'll win a lot of games. And my dad always taught me you do what's best for the team. And if that's what the coach thinks makes the team better, you just do it. And I had to learn on the run. And I had to learn everything on the run. And first game of the year was a brand new team, Howard Schnellenberger. And no one knew. I can't tell you anybody thought we were going to win a national championship my freshman year, but I knew we had good players. We had a tremendous freshman class, one of the top classes in the class. Me, Jerome Brown, Melvin Bratton, Danny Stubbs, Brian Blades, and all these guys who all played pro football. We knew we had an opportunity to be pretty good at some time. Didn't know it was going to be our first year. And lo and behold, I go in as running back my freshman year. I'm just about starting
Mm-hmm.
at fullback at the University of Miami, and I started my career off bad because Wilbur Marshall decapitated me after my first carry of the game was 17 yards, and I was like, "Oh, this is easy." Second play, I caught a screen and turned the wrong way. I ran into the traffic. He took my head off, and I was done for most of the year. I had a separated shoulder, 10 stitches here, 6 stitches here in the shoulder. So I was on ice until about the 8th game of the year.
Wow.
And they brought me along slowly. And then in the national championship game, Coach said, "You're going to play a big role in this game." And, fortunate, I scored a touchdown. We won the game. And things took off from there with the University of Miami. And we became a dominant program. We played for 3 national championships, won one, and I would probably say we were the better team both in the national championship games. We lost, but I think probably a little bit immaturity at that time in our lives, young guys. And things you have to remember about college football back then, we were done before Thanksgiving.
Oh, it's amazing to even think about that now, but yeah, crazy.
we didn't play again until January 1st or 2nd. And each of those games we lost, we came out flat. We weren't the same team that ended the season. So I think that played a big part in it. But you got to give the other team credit. They won the game, so they were better that day. But it sparked a dynasty at the University of Miami. It changed the culture of college football a little bit, those Miami teams. It was made for TV. You know, they've done documentaries about it. But at the end of the day, I was glad to be part of it. I could have went to school anywhere in the nation. I chose Miami. Sometimes I wonder why, because there hadn't been any bowl games. They hadn't played for anything big. But meeting Howard Schnellenberger, I thought he was the ultimate leader. And I thought that there was something about him that made me feel like we're going to win with this guy. And he had a group of kids who believed in him. And everything transpired in what he believed when he came to my house. When he came into my house in high school, where he told me this program could be if he could get these certain group of kids to come to the University of Miami.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about Howard's replacement later, but what was the feeling when you found out that he left right after winning that national title?
Disappointing. I was very disappointed and hurt because I thought we had a good thing. The next 3 years, that team was loaded. There was nothing but first-round draft picks, second-round draft picks, the Michael Urbans, the Benny Blades, and all these guys. I mean, we were ready to roll, and he left. But I remember my dad telling me, "You didn't choose that school just for a coach. You chose it because you wanted to represent, and you wanted to be good at the university, and you wanted to make you wanted to make the city of Miami a special place for football." Mm-hmm. And I thought Howard Schnellenberg was able to make the city part of the program. The Dolphins hadn't been to the Super Bowl in a long time, and Don Shula was Don Shula in Miami, and Howard Schnellenberger coached for Don Shula, and I think Howard wanted to make the program legendary. He wanted to say, hey, there's not just the Dolphins, there's the University of Miami as well. So I thought that was one of the reasons why I stayed and I didn't transfer. And then we hired this guy named Jimmy Johnson, who I knew nothing about. I didn't even know where Oklahoma State football was. I really never heard of Oklahoma State football. All you knew in the Big 8, I think it was, or Big 12 at that time, was Nebraska and Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And that's basically all I knew. Mm-hmm. And so when we hired Jimmy Johnson, everybody was like, who? Mm-hmm. And after meeting Jimmy Johnson, this dude was, you knew he was a dude. I mean, he was full of swagger, full of energy, tremendous leader. I think one of Jimmy's strongest traits was the fact that he was able to make great players play to that level of football. And I think that's one of his strongest attributes. Elite evaluator, and Jimmy could make the best people play to their best at all times. And it all started with practice, and no different than Howard Schnellenberger, in that practice was the most important thing. You practice at a certain level, you trained at a certain level, and those were the expectations every single day. Any day you walked on the football field at the University of Miami, it was game day. And that was the approach, that was the attitude. And I remember scouts telling me back, we used to go watch University of Miami back when I was there, older scouts when I first got in. They used to just love to go to Miami practices because you saw what football was. You saw the best going against the best. You saw work ethic. You saw energy, and people practice like it mattered. And that was the culture at the University of Miami at that time. Howard started it, and Jimmy took it even further.
Mm-hmm. Just a remarkable talent level of those teams when you were there. I mean, and it continued on obviously for several years and even past when Jimmy left. I mean, it was an amazing dynasty, and it was great to be able to watch those games and just kind of be able to follow all that stuff. What a great time for college football. Okay, so again, people think of you as a player and as a scout, but there was a time for 4 years that you were a heavyweight boxer, 27 1 and 2, man.
Yeah, it was an interesting time because I didn't go into boxing to box. I went into boxing to do something else after football competitive. I enjoy working out. I enjoy going to the gym, and I boxed a little bit as a kid growing up, but never really anything big or anything like that. Never any golden gloves or anything like that. But I've always enjoyed boxing, and so when I was through, I didn't want to lift weights. I didn't want to jog. I didn't want to just walk 4 miles. So I said, you know what? Let me challenge myself because I was still relatively young.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, let me go to a boxing gym and start hitting the heavy bag. And I said, well, if I'm going to hit the heavy bag, I need to get a trainer or somebody to help me so I can do it correctly. And I met a guy named Al Bolden, and I started training with him. And at that time, Main Street Gym was like the capital of boxers in America. Holyfield trained there. I mean, there were so many. The Tate brothers trained there. There were so many champions. Lou Duva had his boxers there. There were so many renowned guys you seeing on HBO fights and that kind of stuff at the gym every day.
Mm-hmm.
I started training, and then people were like, "Oh man, you're pretty good. You ever done boxing before?" Yeah. Have you ever boxed professional? I said no. They said, "Well, you want to spar with some of my guys?" So I started sparring with guys, and after sparring with guys said, "Man, you should have a pro fight." And boxing got to the point for me where you ever swim too far, you can't go back. I got too far involved in boxing to turn back.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept going and kept going and kept going. One fight led to 5 fights, and 5 fights led to 10 fights. And it just kept going, and to the point where people started going, hey, this is a former football player and he's pretty good. Let's get him on these shows. And it was a lot of fun for me because I boxed all over the world. Boxed in Argentina, Japan,
Wow.
Las Vegas. I fought in Caesar's Palace. I fought in the MG. I mean, I was on the undercard of Oscar De La Hoya, George Foreman, Razor Ruddock and Tommy Morris. And I was on those cards, and they liked me on the cards because I had an audience.
Mm-hmm.
So people would come to see the football player fight. And what people don't know is I trained for over 15 months before I had my first fight.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't just go in there and say, oh, I'm going to box and embarrass. I didn't want to embarrass myself, and I didn't want to embarrass the sport of boxing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took it seriously. It was a career. It was a job. And I used to.
Houston was, people don't realize Houston was a decent fight town back then.
We had fights once a month in hotels and that kind of stuff. And I became the headliner. Me and Lou Savarici was one of my closest friends in boxing, and Bob Spagnola was my manager. And then I signed with Cedric Kushner to fight on his shows on HBO. So I was part of the first fight nights at the Apollo Theater in New York on HBO.
Interesting.
So I did a lot of interesting things, and it was a lot of fun, met a lot of good people, and I left boxing. I signed a contract to fight George Foreman. We were going to fight in the Astrodome because George Foreman had never fought in Houston his whole career.
Mm-hmm.
And so we signed a contract to fight. It was going to be my first $1 million fight. I was going to fight in Houston, and George Foreman agreed. It was announced, actually. I remember in USA Today, they said George Foreman and Alonzo Highsmith were going to fight, and it was sort of a press conference. And George Foreman said, well, I got one more fight before I got to fight Alonzo Highsmith in Houston, and then he was going to go fight Larry Holmes. And the promoter from the Larry Holmes fight told him, you can't take another fight before this fight. So I got canceled out, and that's when I went into scouting.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you ever get in the ring with Evander or with George?
No, just messing around in the gym. I was good friends with Evander's trainer, so we were all good friends, and I did a lot of the workouts with them, but I never had the opportunity to fight them.
What was Denise's reaction when you told her you were going to start fighting?
Thought I was crazy. I think everyone thought I was crazy. I think when people think of fighting, they think of Mark Gastineau, Too Tall Jones,
Oh,
and
yeah.
those and that type of stuff. And I was trying to separate myself from that. You remember they used to have the Tuesday night fights on USA?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Fought several times, so it was a lot of fun. And then I wanted to get the Mark Gastineau thing off of me, so the promoter put a fight together on the George Foreman card for me and him to fight in Japan,
mhm.
and ended up knocking him out, winning the fight, and that kind of put me. If you have levels of fighters, you have A, B, C fighters. I was about a C, and but when that fight came off, I thought I took boxing as far as I wanted to go because I've got a family and
Sure.
a career, and boxing is not a career. It's something you do, and it's a great sport, but it wasn't my destiny. And someone asked me if I ever thought about scouting, and that's when I got the interview with the Green Bay Packers in 1998 with Ron Wolf.
Mhm. Perfect segue. All right. So my understanding is during my research, 13 years on the road with the Packers covering the Southwest. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. What lessons did you learn? That's a long time to be hitting schools and making visits and watching players. What lessons did you learn in those days?
Um, First of all, let me say this. I came, scouting's a little bit different than it was when I started. And I am God blessed to have had the opportunity to work with people like Jim Hess. Seal Boccato was like a mentor to me. John Paul, all these guys, they were older scouts. And I got the opportunity to learn the value of scouting through them. Um, they taught me the lessons, the work ethic, the camaraderie, the importance of the job. And, I love traveling with Seal Boccato. I love listening to his stories. My dad was a coach and pro football player. My dad played at Florida A&M. My dad was a storyteller, and we could sit around my dad for days, and he'd tell you about playing in the 60s and playing against legendary Hall of Famers and playing in the same Continental Football League as Johnny Unitas. And,
Wow.
so I've always been a football guy. And to sit around Seal Boccato and listen to him tell you stories about, you know, working out Earl Campbell and Darryl Green and these people, I got the greatest lesson of all time. And I've always been appreciative of that. And I was blessed to be in that situation. And then me and CO became the best of friends, and we traveled together. We did what we call wildcat workouts together that are kind of illegal, but we did them anyway. And I loved it, man. I truly loved being on the road with Seal Boccato and Jim Hess and all those older scouts. So I got a really good life lesson in scouting on the road.
Yeah. Jim and John Paul are two men that have been really special to me. I call them my uncles in the game. So believe me, I know exactly what you're talking about there. All right. So, Zoe, you've won two Bart List awards. The first year we offered, and then last year, basically, which was your kind of your first full year back with a team. Basically, as your interlude in Miami was the only time when you weren't winning Bart List awards. Um, what do most so and obviously we know that you have an eye for talent, you know that you know how to evaluate. What do most teams get wrong when it comes to player evaluation? So
And I will say it's not most teams, it's myself included. I think sometimes we make it harder than it really is. Um, there's so many factors that go into being a great football player. Sometimes we chip away too much at what we see on film, and we don't let the film The film speaks for itself sometimes. And there are some great football players who don't measure out right, who don't run the time speed you want. Then there's guys who aren't that good at football players who time well, jump well, and all that kind of stuff. So we all get it wrong. But I do think at the end of the day, it's just based on what you see on film. How good of a football is he? A good football player? And I think that's the thing that matters the most when you watch film. We're trying to find good football players, and I think sometimes we make it a little harder than it is, and we all get it wrong, including myself. And that's just part of this game. I don't think it's a perfect business. It's an imperfect business because you don't know what you don't know, and there's a lot of things that go into football: injuries, mentality, physical toughness, mental toughness. Those are a lot of things we can't evaluate, but we can see that on film. Mm-hmm. So film is always going to be the number one thing for myself. I tell people all the time that who you are as an individual, I call your DNA. You can tell me everything you want about you as an individual and player. Well, then I should see it on the field. And it's sort of like one of those crime stories as criminals. You can say you weren't there, you didn't do it. Hey, but we got your DNA. Well, if you're supposed to be physical, you're supposed to be mentally tough, you're supposed to be all the things you say you are, let's turn the film on because that's your DNA. Mm-hmm. Your DNA identifies you as that type of player or not that type of player. And, those are the things we battle with as scouts, as organizations, and selecting players.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So you start off in Green Bay. And I think when I think about Green Bay, when a lot of people think about Green Bay, you think about success at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
But not just Favre, not just Rodgers, not just Stephen Love. Kurt Warner was in camp at one time. Mark Brunell was in camp at one time. You got Aaron Brooks, all these quarterbacks who had at least some measure of NFL success. Seems like a lot of them came through Green Bay. How are the Packers able to get the quarterback position right more often than not? How do they find quality passers almost at every round of the draft? I mean, what is it that they're doing differently?
Well, I think it all starts with Ron Wolf. Ron Wolf understood the importance of the quarterback position, and basically when you look at it, and it's just, I do things in layman terms sometimes. I can't tell you, I can't, I don't have a crystal ball. But I will say this, and it goes all the way back to Pop Warner football. Whoever had the best quarterback usually was the best team. Mm-hmm. Whether he was a runner, whether he was a thrower, didn't matter. If he was the best player on the field at the quarterback position, I'm going to say that team had more than 80% chance of winning. And I think I've been God blessed. I started my career off in high school with Mike Shula, was an all-state quarterback. 2 years with Kozar, 2 years with Testaverde, Warren Moon, Troy Aikman, Steve DeBerg. Then I got in scouting, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and then I was with Russell Wilson for a few years. And then we drafted Baker Mayfield, and now I'm back in the NFL again, and now I'm with Drake May. I took for granted the quarterback position because I thought everyone had a good quarterback most of my life. I didn't, I really didn't know what it was like playing with a bad quarterback. Mm-hmm. So, but now I understand that the quarterback position is the most important position in the history of all sports. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Your organization, your team, everything is defined by that position. Mm-hmm. That's how important that position is. And if you don't have one, you're gonna have a hard time with consistency winning because of that position. Yes, you can have a once in a lifetime defense or once in a lifetime running back or But without the quarterback, I don't think it's very sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
The quarterback position is sustainable when he's a great one, when he's at that certain level of the Mahomes, the Aaron Rodgers, the Josh Allens, and those guys. So, you know, playing with Warren Moon, I never went on the field thinking we didn't have a chance to win.
Mm-hmm.
I think the greatest thing the great quarterbacks do, they give you a four-letter word when they walk in the huddle. They give you hope.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime you've got Patrick Mahomes, anytime you've got Josh Allen, even when the team's not as good because of injuries and pieces are missing, you're still good enough to win because that quarterback is that good.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's probably the life lessons I've learned from the game of football, and is how important that quarterback position. And then when you evaluate the quarterback position, it's almost like a golf course. If you play golf, you go to that driving range, you see some guys that can drive the ball 350 yards, and then you look at another guy who can't hit it but 250 yards, and he's a scratch golfer. I think the biggest thing in the quarterback position is the mental makeup. I used to think it was arm talent and legs, all this stuff. It's to me, it's the mental makeup of the individual, because so much is required of you at that position. I mean, when I see these quarterbacks these days, and I've been around some pretty good ones, I don't want to play the quarterback position. You know what I mean? It requires so much of you, and you have to have that mental makeup to withstand what's coming at that position. And it's a special breed of people who play that position
Mm-hmm.
at a high level.
Okay, so you referenced Drake May. Obviously, y'all got the quarterback right 2 years ago when you got him out of North Carolina. How is evaluating quarterbacks different now from how it was 10 years ago? How about 20 years ago? How has the evaluation changed as the player has changed and as the expectation of the player has changed?
I would probably say the evolution of the game. No huddle offenses, spread offenses, and these kids play 7-on-7 year round. Everyone's throwing the football. The one-handed catch that Odell Beckham made in Monday Night Football, that's routine in 7-on-7 football.
Yeah.
The skill level is at an all-time high at the wide receiver position. There's a lot more quarterback tutelage. There's a lot more. It's really hard to judge quarterbacks sometimes because they all throw the ball 40 times a game sometimes. Mm-hmm. And then you see the arm talent, then you see the legs, and you see the no huddle offenses. And then when you get to pro football, it's a total different game. The complexity of the game, the athletes playing the game, the defenders, the edge rushers. Rarely do you see a Myles Garrett in college football. Mm-hmm. So in the NFL, not only are you going to see Myles Garrett, you're going to see 15 other guys just like him at every position. I mean, at the defensive end position, rushing the quarterback, the size, the speed, so the mechanics of the quarterback, getting the ball out quickly, managing the game, all those, there's so much that goes into it that's different from college football. So that's probably one of the harder things. Yes, he has the arm talent, he's got the legs, but the process, can he process it? Can he make quick decisions? All those sorts of things. And the game is so fast now. Everyone's big, everyone's fast. And it requires you to think ahead. It requires you to have great anticipation. I don't think you have to, like a golfer. I don't think you have to drive the ball 400 yards to win a tournament. Mm-hmm. But you have to be accurate. You do have to be decisive. You do have to be mentally tough, and all those things. So that's how the quarterback position's changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So Zoe, you've worked with Elliott Wolf in
Mm-hmm.
3 different locations: Green Bay originally, of course, then Cleveland, and now New England. You've won in all 3 places. What is that synergy like, and how do you two complement each other?
Well, I think the one thing about I've always enjoyed working with Elliot is he's a good person. You know, you know, I study a lot of things spiritually and people wise, and I think the most important aspect of our business is happiness in the people you work with. And show me a lot of winning and a lot of success, you usually see a happy personnel staff, a happy college staff, a lot of good people who are there with no egos. And the thing that I respect about Elliot the most is he has no ego. The
It's
only thing,
remarkable.
and not only is he smart, but he's egoless. He cares more about the team and building a good football team than any personal gratification.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was similar to his dad, very similar to Ted Thompson, that, Ted Thompson used to refer himself as just a scout.
Mm-hmm.
And Ron Wolf used to say, I'm just a scout. Yes, I am the GM, but our job is to evaluate players. And that's how I've always looked at it. And, there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's all different types of ways to win and evaluate players in this league. But I think over time, what John Schneider's done, what Brian Gutekunst has done, what John Dorsey did, I think the way Ron Wolf trained and taught everybody, I think it's sustained success.
Mm-hmm.
And making college drafting, the evaluation of players, the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
That is, regardless of what you think about football, the most important thing is the evaluation of players, because you can't win without good players and the development of players. So, it's a young man's game. It's always going to be a big, fast man's game, and you got to be young. And those are some of the things I think, Ron Wolf, times were different because of free agency when Ron Wolf's era and my era early when I played pro football. But with the constant movement of players now, you have to develop something that's sustainable, and that comes from the college draft.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we've already named several of the people that you've worked alongside, teammates with, yeah, but I want to throw some names at you, just of some of the ones we haven't talked about yet. Give me a couple sentences on each of these guys. Bernie Kosar.
Probably one of the smartest quarterbacks I've ever been around, who had the athleticism of a guy that shouldn't be playing football. His anticipation, his vision made him special.
Jerry Glanville.
Oh, Don Rickles. Loved playing for him. He was funny. Um, you know, I thought he was a good man, but I enjoyed playing for him because he was tough
Mm-hmm.
and wanted his team to be tough.
Mm-hmm. Someone you've already referenced, but Ron Wolf.
Oh man, I'd probably say the in that movie The Matrix, the gatekeeper, the guy with all the keys, that's him. Um, Tremendous memory, made football always important. Um, all he cared about was you doing your job and finding players.
Mm-hmm.
That was the fun part working for him.
John Schneider.
Oh man, probably one of my favorite people in pro football because of his humility
Mm-hmm.
and his affection for the people he works with. Great man, loves to laugh, doesn't think of himself as anything other than just John Schneider. Um, really good culture,
Mm-hmm.
John.
Brian Gutekunst.
Very bright. A really good thinker. Brian's very sit back. He's one of those guys that sits back, watches, and then he's going to inject what he has to say. But he's also another guy that's very humble. Um, we had a mixed group in Green Bay, but all our personalities all worked together because I think at the end of the day, everybody was humble and didn't have egos. Mm-hmm. And I think Brian's one of the best GMs in pro football. He's done a hell of a job in Green Bay. We came in together in Green Bay, and he's always been a family man, a very nice guy, but very serious about football, and football is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Last name, the new GM in Miami, John Eric Sullivan.
John Eric got hired. He was like a little son to me. And the funniest thing is when we hired John Eric Sullivan, I knew his dad. His dad recruited me out of high school.
Oh, wow.
So I knew Mr. Sullivan from back when I was 11th and 12th grade. And my mom was so distraught when I said I was going to go to South Carolina because she loved John Eric's dad. And so when John Eric got the job with us at the Green Bay Packers, I called his dad. I said, "Hey, Mr. Sullivan, I'm going to take care of him. I got him." So John Eric's always been like a younger brother to me. Mm-hmm. We've always been good friends, his family, his kids, and we've had a lot of good times together. And another guy who's very humble. Mm-hmm. And football's the most important thing. And he cares about the people he works with.
You know what's funny is though, this never occurred to me, but you're right. Almost everyone who came out of that Green Bay, who's on that Green Bay tree, is an exceptionally humble person. Yeah. I don't know if that's a core value that Ron taught, or maybe Ted did, or if that was just part of the culture there. But man, it really is.
Well, I think the most important thing is show me a good scouting department or personal staff, and I'll show you a happy bunch of people. Mm-hmm. I've always believed that you can have fun, you can enjoy yourself at work, but work your ass off. Mm-hmm. You can go out, get together, go out a bunch of guys and have beer. The thing I love that I learned in Green Bay with Scott McCloughan again, who's one of the all-time great evaluators from Green Bay, was Scott McCloughan, and I still talk to Scott McCloughan regularly. That they're normal people. Mm-hmm. They don't think of themselves as some tyrant or I'm gonna lock my door and nobody talk to me. I didn't grow up in that type of atmosphere. I grew up in an atmosphere where a lot of camaraderie, a lot of good people who enjoyed being around each other, who could laugh at each other. Mm-hmm. And the sparring sessions we had in Green Bay and in Seattle, you had to have thick skin because people were going to mess with you, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, we had a lot of fun, but football was the number one priority. We all knew that, and we knew when it was time to do our jobs. Ron Wolf used to say, "I'm not asking you to do pro film. I'm not asking you to do preseason games, but I am expecting you to know every player in your area. That's your job." And I took great pride in being a Southwest scout because I looked at myself as a CEO. Mm-hmm. I was the CEO for the Green Bay Packers in the Southwest, and I took tremendous pride and I got that from people like CO, Picato, and those old Jim Hess and those guys. I took a great deal of pride in working for the Green Bay Packers and being the CEO for the Green Bay Packers in the Southwest. And I tell a lot of young scouts, I took the same enthusiasm going into LSU as I did in Southeast Louisiana. Mm-hmm. I took the same enthusiasm going to Texas as I did Texas State. Mm-hmm. To me, yes, Texas is bigger, they got this, but to me, it's still about evaluation of players. Maybe there's that one guy at Texas State who changes the outcome for the Green Bay Packers. Mm-hmm. That's how I always thought on the road. And people would say, "Why are you going to that school? It's not important." Yeah, it's important to me because I enjoy it. I enjoy going to schools and meeting people. And probably the greatest thing in this job was just the people you meet in the business and the relationships you build through 25 years, 30 years, or however long you've been in this business. You build a lot of good relationships with people, and you're friends for life. And I think that, the hardest thing for former players, I've always told former players when they want to get in this business, the day you come in, you have to separate yourself from the former player. So just now you're just working in the scouting department. You'll never hear me talk about, well, I did it this way because I played, or I play. I don't even ever. I try and never bring up that I played. I'm on the road with you guys. We're eating at McAllister's or wherever we're eating, having a beer. I'm just like you. Hey, I make mistakes. Let's work together. And all the guys like James Lifford, Joe Shane, and Chris Ballard, and all those guys I work with, we still talk to this day because we worked, and we took great pride in our jobs. And I think any young scout, if you're worried about trying to be a GM by the time you're 35 years old, you probably shouldn't do this. I didn't even know. First of all, when I first got in scouting, probably my first 10 years, I didn't even know how you become a GM. I enjoy the road. And, people always, I think the only time I ever thought about being a GM was because people ask me all the time, well, you're going to be a GM one day. This guy's a GM, this guy. I've done so much in football. GM isn't at the top of my list. You know what I mean? It would be a fun thing. It would be something to say I did, but that's not what drives me. Football drives me. Being part of a team drives me. Having the New England Patriots or the Green Bay Packers, whatever team with, depending on you, is what drives me in this business. And whatever else comes along with it, that just comes along with it.
If there's one criticism of young scouts that I hear consistently from executives is they want to be a GM at year 3, year 4,
I think that's because there's a lot of young scouts together on the road. When in my era, like I keep going back to Seal Mercado, these guys have been scouting for 20 years, 30 years. So when you're around people who've been doing it for so long, they teach you the value of the job. You know what I mean? When you've been in it from 23 years old to 27 years old, and everybody you run with is your age group, and all you look up and see is guys getting elevated here and elevated there, it's just a natural thing that happens. And I used to joke around with CEOs, how come you're not a GM? I don't want to do that shit. You know what? I understood why. And you talk to a lot of guys. Yeah, it's a great thing. It's a great thing, and kudos to those guys who are GMs, who I have a great deal of respect from. But also thought one of the things I think about being a GM, I think it would take away from really who I am a little bit. And like I enjoy going to Wildcat workouts. I enjoy an agent calling me and say, hey, I got a guy. Can you look at him? Hey, I got nothing to do. It's July, and there's a bunch of guys who are working out these workout facilities. Let me ask these guys if they want to work out. Maybe I'll find one guy. You know what I mean? So it's a balance of what you want to do in life and what's important to you. What was important to me was finding players, like making sure we find a Tramon Williams, those type players, and that was the most important thing to me. The other stuff, that's just bells and whistles. And I have a lot of friends who are GMs, and I talk to them all the time, and I admire them, and I'm happy for them. But never am I going to sit back and say, "Oh, how come I'm not a GM?" I don't think like that. I've always been a team player, and my value will help the team somewhere down the line.
All right, so by my research, so you were promoted into an executive role with the Packers, came off the road in 2012.
Yep.
Almost immediately, the team began finding Pro Bowlers after day one. Give us your recollection of the selection of some of these players that I'm going to give you in some of these drafts. 2012 class. Y'all took Casey Hayward in the second round and Mike Daniels in the fourth round. You remember that draft class?
Yeah, yeah. Casey Hayward was one of my favorite guys and good kid, and he was very. I think the thing that made Casey good was his anticipation and his vision and instincts. He was a natural football player, and the game came easy for him. He was real fluid, had good eyes. I don't think he was the fastest guy or anything like that, but he was a good football player. And, he knew how to play the game.
Okay. 2013, y'all took David Bakhtiari in the fourth round.
Ted loved Bakhtiari because he was athletic and he could bend. And his numbers weren't great or anything like that. He wasn't an imposing looking guy, but he was really good in pass protection, had great feet. He was tough, competitive, and he had a little swagger to him. Mm-hmm. And you go back to Mike Daniels was all fire and brimstone. He was hilarious. I love Mike Daniels because he was like Sergeant Carter. He came with his hard hat every day, and he talked the talk and he walked the walk.
2014, a receiver out of Fresno State that some people have heard of, Davante Adams.
Yeah, Ted loved him. Ted thought he was the number one thing with Ted Thompson, receiver, was you had to catch the ball. He didn't care about the speed. He didn't care about it. You had to be able to catch the ball. And Davante had elite hands, basketball type skills. I don't think he's never been a burner or an explosive guy, but he was quick and could separate and had elite hands.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 2017 draft, Jamal Williams in the fourth round and Aaron Jones in the fifth round.
Oh, man. I love Aaron Jones, and I still talk to him. His family, when they used to come to town, used to come to my house and eat dinner. And, Mom and Dad, I was so sorry when his dad passed away. But every time you watch film on Aaron Jones, it was a long run. That dude broke more runs, long runs. He was quick. He was agile. He was a hell of a player. And Jamal was tough between the tackles. He reminded me of running back from Buffalo we drafted. Oh, boy. Nah, and I love the kid. I'll think of his name in a minute. But Jamal was tough. Between the tackles, runner, could catch the ball out of the backfield. And he was a good dude. He had a lot of swagger and he had a lot of oomph to him. You know what I mean? He came juiced up, ready to go. I liked him.
Okay, 2018, mid-January. I think the January 10th, I think, is when you're officially made part of the Browns front office, along with Elliott, along with John Dorsey. 3 months later, you drafted Baker Mayfield out of Oklahoma, Denzel Ward out of Ohio State, and Nick Chubb out of Georgia with 3 of your first 4 picks. All 3 have gone on to multiple Pro Bowls. How are you able to go, Zoe, from being given the keys to your office about 3 weeks after Christmas to such a great draft class in about 14 weeks?
Well, I would probably, it's just timing in life sometimes. I mean, the Cleveland Browns, they gathered a lot of picks, and it was just about us getting them the picks right when you're picking that high. And I've never really been that excited about high draft picks because you're picking in the first pick or the second pick. You're supposed to get it right. That's how I kind of think. But obviously, we make mistakes and stuff like that. So it is hard, but when you're drafting that high, it is a momentum change. It does change your organization. And the thing I remember about Cleveland was they were coming off 1-32. And I think someone had told me they were 7-50 something on the road. And when you're going into that type of situation, You got to flip it quick. You've got to change that roster over. You've got to add dynamic players. You've got to change the culture. You have to get a lot of pieces that aren't there. You've got to make them work. You got to get them in quick. Mm-hmm. And John Dorsey did a great job, him and Elliott, of flipping the roster, changing the attitudes, getting the culture changed. And then lo and behold, we had the first pick, and you had Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen, who were the two top guys. And for different reasons, we picked Baker Mayfield. And one thing I liked about Baker Mayfield, I thought that because everything was so negative in Cleveland, 1-32, they hadn't won. Every day he used to post all the quarterbacks who failed in Cleveland since Bernie Kosar. And I thought at the end of the day that it was going to take a special guy to turn it around. And we chose Baker. And in our first year, we won 7 games. I think we went 7-8-1 or whatever it was. And I think after the second year, Baker was playing well and all that kind of stuff. And, everything was going good. And then the wheels fell off the second year. And then they let John go, which is unfortunate. Mm-hmm. And I felt bad because I really like the people of Cleveland. They've got tremendous support. It's a great football town, the Cleveland Browns, a lot of history. So I wanted to win more than they wanted to win because I don't like losing. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to be part of whatever went on in the past. And at the end of the day, it didn't work out. And Mr. Haslam, he makes those decisions. And so I knew I'd be okay. And, I ended up back with John Schneider, which was a blessing. And because I enjoyed working with John in Green Bay, and we were friends throughout the years. We loved talking. We loved talking football and being around groups of people that talk around football, guys you drink beer with. So it was a perfect time for me. When I left Cleveland, went to Seattle, everything worked out well. And and I'm glad to see Baker Mayfield is back to being Baker Mayfield. And I think a lot of people don't remember, but before Baker got hurt his second or third year in the league with his shoulder, he was leading the league in passing. I mean, it was balling. He got hurt and things went south for him, but I'm glad to see him rebound because the one thing I loved about Baker was his resilience. I thought he was tough. I thought he was a guy who could take the pressure of being that guy and say, whatever you think, I don't really give a shit. You know what I mean? And so it didn't work out for him, but he's got back to where, he's back to being Baker Mayfield. And, so, I mean, you could hindsight right now, Josh Allen's probably one of the best quarterbacks. I mean, that goes both ways,
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it says something about Mayfield's makeup that he kind of was on the scrap heap and not expected to win the starting job in Tampa. And here we are, I don't know how many playoff appearances they've made since he got there, but it certainly has been a validation of his ability and his ability to win that they've had this success in Tampa that they've had.
Well, yeah, Baker's going to win now. As long as he's healthy and things are right and good team, he'll win.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you spent 2 years in Seattle and then did something that was pretty revolutionary at the time. You took over as GM at your alma mater in Miami. That was a new thing then. Now we think about, we hear about GMs at the college level all the time. Alonzo, what was that like? And is college administration something that you would do again?
I think it was, at that time, it was the right thing to do. But as time went on, it wasn't the right thing to do. I loved the University of Miami, and I had no problems with American football. College football wasn't me. What I wanted to do as GM was different than how the University of Miami wanted to do things. And I just kind of felt after two seasons that it wasn't me. And would I do it again? I'd have to see what the structure's like. Mm-hmm. Because our structure in Miami was totally different than pro football. You're still evaluating, but the process is different. And, before you take one of these GM jobs in college, you have to sit down with the head coach. You have to lay out the game work, the game plan, how everything works, what's your role. And I didn't do any of that before I went to University of Miami. Mm-hmm. And I don't even think the University of Miami knew how to react to a GM. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think that was the hard part. And after 2 years of being there, I kind of felt like, this is all right, but I need to get back to the NFL where I can really do some work. So when Elliot Wolf called me in 2024, I said, yep, I'm good. And made my way back. And the funniest thing is I really only missed one combine and one Senior Bowl. So that was all good.
That's pretty funny, yeah. All right, so more and more we're seeing the impact of analytics on the game, on evaluation. We're starting to see, obviously, I think the portal and analytics have probably had more impact on evaluation than anything that I can think of in the last 10 to 20 years. How do you integrate traditional scouting methods with the numbers, though?
You know what? And people, I'm old school scouting, but I'm not dumb. And I have a great deal of respect for analytics. I think analytics, it provides great value in how you use it. I still think the eye test is the number one factor in being a good football player and watching tape. I still think that's number one. But I do believe there's analytical value to the process and how it can help you in determining players' ability and how they're going to progress at the next level. Mm-hmm. I think there's fascinating numbers. There's some things. We've got a guy here named Max with us. He's phenomenal. He comes up with things and ideas and thoughts, and analytics deals with a lot of past success and past lack of success. So you get all areas of combining that to come to a conclusion. And that conclusion helps you based on what you see on tape. Mm-hmm. So I think there's great value, and it's just how you use it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's been a fabulous hour plus, though. I've got one more question, man. Thank you for being so generous with your time. But more and more, we're seeing GMs hired now who have a background in cap or in analytics or even operations. Mm-hmm. So is there still a place for a traditional GM who's a pure evaluator, who is going to own that board, who's been on the road? Is there still a place for that guy as a GM of an NFL team?
Yeah, I think there is. Just how you delegate everything. I think it's about communication. I think it's about knowing the people you hire. I think more because the GM is pulled in so many different ways now in the NFL. I think it's important for the GM to be able to sleep at night. He has to hire good people around him. Mm-hmm. He has to hire. If I'm a GM and I know I'm going to be pulled in certain different directions and that kind of stuff, I need real football people with me who watch tape, who evaluators, good evaluators, to help me with my day-to-day operation of evaluating players, because the GM is pulled in so many different directions, meeting with owners, issues with the team. I watch what Elliot has to do, and, sometimes he doesn't get the opportunity to watch film. So he'll say, hey, can you watch these 10 guys for me? And, I'll do the tape and give them to him what I saw, and he go, good, I'll get to them later. So it's important that you have the right people. I think there's a role for a traditional GM, but he's going to have to delegate. He's going to have to have really good people around him who know football to make his job easier. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Alonzo Highsmith, it has been an absolute pleasure, buddy. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. My best of luck to you in the 2026 season, my man, and thank you for your friendship all these years.
I'll see you at Lulin's Barbecue soon, okay?
Sounds good, man.
All righty. Take care.
You too.
Agents, before we go, make sure you go check out Agent Live 360. It is at agentlive360.com for everything you need for your agency, from players to coaches, managing profiles, tracking invoices, sending invoices, getting paid, keeping up on every element of your entire agency. Notification emails, file folder storage, ROI, transactions, invoices, calendar, contracts, teams, reps, everything all in one spot for you. That is Agent Live 360. Hop on, request a demo. Yours truly will hop on, walk you through it. I can promise you we will talk some football as well. Sign up now with code TRIAL90 for a 90-day, 3-month trial at just $10 a month for Agent Live 360. That's at agentlive360.com. Go check it out now.